stim, all right? Until a child normalizes, develops their sensory function, and until they've developed global neurological function, which will permit them to engage in an active play. Essentially, all children are kind of stuck with stimulating themselves through sensory play. So, you know, typical children will rock, they'll suck their thumbs, you know, they'll do some visual stimming, some different kinds of tactile stimming. You know, we perceive this as being normal in a typical baby. However, in our children within the spectrum, the sensory dysfunction and resulting sensory addictive behaviors become consuming. Essentially, if you look at your child and look at those quote-unquote stims, those abnormal behaviors, if you will, those weird behaviors, essentially what you're seeing your child doing is playing with what's broken within sensory channels. At the top of the list typically are visual issues. And some visual issues are pretty obvious and others are not so obvious. To understand the visual issues, you need to understand the difference between what's called central macular vision and peripheral vision. All children begin life primarily using their peripheral vision, and then they develop their central macular vision. All right, if you were to look at a spot across the room from where you're sitting, you could probably see an area, you know, maybe a foot, 18 inches in diameter, where you see clearly and see detail, and that is what's called your macular field or your central detail vision. The rest of what you see that's out around all the sides is your peripheral vision. And your peripheral vision is not clear and detailed as is your central vision. Visual stimming, visual debilitating sensory addictive behaviors, essentially are children playing with that peripheral vision which is enhanced. Children with normal vision do not stim, visually stim, simply because it doesn't work. All right, visual stims are playing with the peripheral vision, and some are, as I say, are obvious. You know, if you have a child who is flapping their hands up around their heads, that's obviously a visual stim. The children who are playing and shaking sticks or strings or whatever, that's obviously visual peripheral stim. Kids who like to spin around, that's peripheral visual stim. All of these things that the children engage in, they're playing with that enhanced peripheral vision, and unfortunately, the more they do that, the more they are strengthening the peripheral vision, and the more difficult they're making for development of the central vision. And sadly, your central macular vision is what you use for learning. You know, it's your central macular vision that permits you to look at and attend to someone's face. It's your central macular vision that permits you to look at the page in a book. You know, many of our children with these issues, rather than actually looking at what's on a page, they tend to flip the pages, all right, and they're attracted to the movement and the edges of the flipping pages. All right, so your peripheral vision picks up movement and edges. One of the more subtle visual debilitating sensory addictive behaviors is children actually scan edges. So they don't actually have to be physically flipping or moving something. You know, you watch your child's eye gaze, and you'll see often that that eye gaze is scanning the edges in the room. Right? Now, the reason why I refer to these as sensory debilitating addictive behaviors is that essentially what is going on, the child is playing with what is broken in a sensory channel. As they do that, that play or stim, as it's called, is actually producing endorphins. And endorphins, if you will, are feel-good brain chemicals. And the children's brain literally become addicted to these behaviors. Now, if you watch the children who are on the spectrum who are really severe, you know, you can see that the children would rather stim than eat. All right, it is such a powerful addiction. And you'll also see, you know, with most of the kids across the spectrum, as soon as you stop engaging them, they tend to immediately go into one of these debilitating sensory addictive behaviors. Unfortunately, the more they engage in addictive behaviors, the more addictive they become. And as many of you have found, you may succeed in stopping them from doing one, but they quickly pick up on doing another one. All right, so that becomes a very significant issue. So we need to not only stop the addictive behavior by keeping the kids engaged, we also have to work aggressively at normalizing the sensory channels so that it is not, if you will, fun to do that anymore. The brain isn't attracted to the behavior. In the case of the visual issues, it's a matter of developing the central macular vision, right, the central detail vision. The stronger that gets, the less that peripheral issue is such a big deal for the kids, and you know, they start moving away from that addictive behavior. One of the greatest therapeutic tools, fortunately, for developing macular vision is actually the TV. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about television later in terms of how it can be used not only in terms of development and treatment of the central macular vision, but also as an excellent learning tool for our kids. But at the top of the list of what we do with all the children within the spectrum is identify what is broken in each of these sensory channels, work to normalize the sensory channel, and keep the child engaged and away from the sensory addictive behaviors. Now, these addictive behaviors can involve any of the senses and senses in combination. If your child has auditory issues, which are almost universal with our kids, you hear tonal play where they will make different sounds, vocal sounds, and stim with that. They will tap things, do different things to produce sounds that are right on the edge of irritation for them. One of the issues that we have is that hearing does not develop kind of globally across the spectrum. Hearing develops in a very frequency-specific way, meaning you can have a narrow range of frequencies you can hear well. You may have another range of frequencies that are overstated that you're hypersensitive to. You may have other frequencies that are understated that you do not process well enough. All of these things impair the development of receptive language and expressive language, speech. All right, so the auditory issues are right up there in terms of importance with the visual issues, and you know, are certainly one of the most common issues. A lot of the kids, you know, will demonstrate that they have some sound sensitivities. Those are often fairly easy to identify, but what you cannot see are the understated frequencies that they do not process. So essentially everything they tend to hear is to some degree distorted, making the development of receptive and particularly expressive language very difficult. A number of years ago, we helped develop something called the listening program. Listening program was an outgrowth of my working with sound therapy programs since the early 70s when I first discovered Dr. Tomatis in Paris. But we have utilized literally every sound training program, auditory training program that exists. And currently the state-of-the-art there is the listening program which we employ. The kids can also engage in tactile stim. You know, your kids who like feeling edges of things, who like rubbing things that are soft or things that are hard and rough. You know, we have kids who like, you know, rubbing their father's faces and feeling their beards. Again, like any other channel, they will do this. Sadly, many parents perceive this as being simply a soothing thing that the children do and actually encourage it. And again, if you encourage any of these things, you're encouraging addiction. And do the kids like it? Absolutely. They like it just like a drug addict likes his drugs. Doesn't mean it's good for them. All right, there are also stims that involve odors. There's stims that involve tastes. All right, so all of these areas are incredibly important, because if the brain is engaged, if the brain is directed toward sensory addictive behaviors, the brain is not going to be directed toward development and changing and moving the child on. So number one, we keep the child engaged virtually 24/7, and we work to normalize all the sensory channels. Now the next piece that has to happen is something called sequential processing. Sequential processing is something that develops in every human being. And essentially, sequential processing represents how many pieces of information you can take in sequentially in a row. And essentially what this translates to is how much can you see and understand, how much can you hear and understand, and with what complexity can you think. All right, so this is a very, very big deal. If we look at the difference in function between typical children between a year of age and 2 and 3 and 3 and 4 and 4 and 5, those dramatic changes we see in global function are primarily a reflection of improvement, development of this sequential processing. Right? And sequential processing translates into short-term memory, working memory, and global neurological function. All right? Literally, it determines the complexity with which you can think. Now, if we have a child who's severely involved on the spectrum, we may have a child who doesn't process a single piece of information well. And what they do process is probably more visual than auditory. For example, for a child to process a single auditory piece of information, we generally think they need to process and understand and follow a one-step direction. So for example, if you could tell your child, touch your nose, and they could touch their nose without a visual cue. You could tell your child to clap their hands without a visual cue, and they would do it. That child can process one piece, which is essentially equates to what we would typically see with about a 1-year-old child. If you could say to the child 2 random things, like say blue and green, touch your ear, then your nose, jump up and down, and then clap your hands, then we would say their auditory sequential processing is at a 2. And this equates roughly with the global function of a 2-year-old. When they could follow a 3-step direction, then we're sequencing a 3. Relative to language development, our typical understanding is most children who sequence a 1 come out with the occasional word. Now that word that just kind of pops out and you might not hear it again for a month, that child typically is processing 1 piece. When the child can sequence 2 pieces, we start getting some functional language, and the child is speaking in single words, some couplets, and some initial 3-word phrases. Now, with our children on the spectrum, it becomes a little more difficult to assess where they are with their sequential processing relative to a language function, because they cheat the system a little bit. Our children with the spectrum tend to take in chunks of auditory information, often associated with a piece of visual information. For example, a lot of our kids have what we call video speak. And video speak is where they actually take words or lines or phrases from movies and videos and utilize those for communication. All right, so you might have a child who's coming out with a 3 or 4 word phrase from video speak or that they have learned by rote when they maybe are only processing 2 pieces. Right? But for them to actually create functional language themselves, it equates directly to where the sequential processing is. Typically, we need to get sequential processing up to about a 3 before a child is able to engage in appropriate independent developmental play. Now, this is a big issue in that if you're trying to keep the child engaged all day and they're not yet to that level of a 3, you know, they really are dependent upon you or someone helping you to keep them actively engaged because they're not able to do it themselves. Virtually anything a child is doing independently on the spectrum prior to processing 3 pieces of information, they're probably stimming, they're probably engaging in a debilitating sensory addictive behavior on one level or another. Okay, so this is a very, very, very big deal. So part of what we do again is we start off identifying the sensory dysfunctions, normalizing the sensory channels, redirecting them, stopping them from engaging in debilitating sensory addictive behaviors, and then we start working on the sequential processing and developing auditory and visual sequential processing. The development of the sequential processing is largely a matter of determining, number one, where the child actually is with their auditory and visual processing, and then providing lots of opportunities to move it up another notch. You know, from the beginning, it means teaching the child to follow some one-step directions. And when we have, you know, typically a child who can follow about 25 one-step directions, then we start randomly combining those directions, working on 2s. We also have CDs that help train the brain to anticipate the next piece. So we have these CDs that help get the kids from a 1 to a 2 and a 2 to a 3 and a 3 to a 4 and so forth. So we engage a number of different mechanisms to attempt to improve that auditory sequential processing, visual sequential processing. And relative to our kids on the spectrum, the auditory is particularly more significant than the visual. With rare exception, most of the kids on the spectrum are much stronger visually than they are auditorily, which creates some problems all of its own, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But understanding, building, developing the sequential processing is a huge issue. Now, I mentioned that the kids tend to be much stronger visual learners than auditory learners. They also are stronger visualizers than conceptualizers, meaning our kids tend to think in pictures rather than in words. And this creates an issue in that if you're thinking in pictures and not in words, this makes the development of language particularly difficult. So as we move along with the children, and again, we're normalizing the sensory function, we're developing the sequential processing, we have to go through a process where we move them from being visualizers to conceptualizers, move them from thinking almost entirely in pictures to a point where they can think in pictures and in words, change that balance. Now, an understanding of where the specific child is in time relative to these various pieces helps us determine not only what we need to do therapeutically to normalize all these pieces, but it also tells us what we need to do developmentally, educationally, to educate the child. For example, when we have the children, the lower processing, I discovered doing some research way back in the early 70s that I could get children on the spectrum to visually attend if I rapidly flashed information at them. Meaning specifically, I could hold a picture in front of the child and the child would look at the edges of the paper and not actually look at the picture on the paper. But I discovered if I rapidly flashed the information, It has had actual flashcards, rapidly flashing them at like half-second intervals. The movement of the flashing cards would attract the child, and then the child would start attending with their central vision to what was on the cards. So rapidly presenting information, first in terms of just pictures to develop receptive language, and then actually words to develop reading. Reading is one of the best tools we have to help develop the language in the auditory sequential processing. And very early on, we start working on developing reading because it is such a valuable tool for us in terms of the cognitive function, receptive language, and expressive language, as well as obviously an educational tool to teach them other information. But so in terms of education, we start off often with flashcards, and we take the children also and we use that strong macular stimuli, the television, as an educational tool. We use the television to actually help develop the central macular vision, and then we create a lot of therapeutic videos. Therapeutic videos essentially are creating videos to teach a child specific things. The specific thing can be modeling, how to eat with a spoon. The specific thing can be modeling how to go up to someone and say hello. All right, the specific thing can be review of their word cards, or we use expressive language cards and receptive language cards. The TV can be an incredibly strong medium once we teach a child to use that macular vision well enough that they can take advantage of it. One of the negatives relative to television is perseveration. Many of your children, once they discover television, want to perseverate with television and videos. That is, they want to watch the same thing over and over and over again. For some children, it's so specific that they'll have little second-long pieces on videos that they like, and they'll rapidly learn how to keep rewinding a video so they can keep watching that same thing over and over again. With the exception of therapeutic videos, we really don't want to have the child watching the same thing more than a few times. You're actually better off renting videos than you are buying videos. If you buy them, the tendency is going to be to watch them too often. And the danger there gets into this area of visualization and conceptualization. If you watch the eye gaze of most of our children on the spectrum when they are thinking, the majority of the time their eye gaze goes up and to the side. You'll also see that when the child is not engaged and he's not doing some obvious stimming, you'll see that eye gaze go up and to the side. And essentially what is happening as a child is doing that is the child is in fact visualizing. And many of our kids, if they watch a video more than 2 or 3 times, literally memorize the video. So they don't need the video in the on the TV anymore. They can run it in their head. And part of the power and attraction of that is anticipation. All young children get excited when they anticipate something happening and then in fact happens the way they anticipate it. And this leads to this perseveration where the kids get stuck on these same things. And often you'll be sitting with your kids and all of a sudden they'll giggle with no apparent reason. Well, they're watching some video that they have in their mind, and it could be actually a video that they have watched, or it can simply be recalling something that they have seen before and visualizing it again. So sadly, the kids can do this visualization not just with TV and videos, but they can actually create it from life and keep playing the same things. Unfortunately, when the kids are running videos in their mind, they're not using their mind well. They're not developing their mind, and they're certainly not communicating with us, and they're certainly not learning. Right? So this ability to visualize, can be harmful. At the same time, it can be a tool. All right, we can use it, for example, if you want to teach self-help skills, you want to teach interaction specifically on a video, you can teach those things. So we want to be careful what we have them watch. We want to make sure we're using something that we want to have in their minds and not some meaningless thing from some cartoon or Pixar video that is developmentally, educationally going to do them no good whatsoever. So it's something, if we really understand the child, understand what the child is, that we can use it educationally, we can use it developmentally to help move them along. If we don't understand what we're doing, the use of videos, TV can actually make the situation worse for some of the kids. So there are a number of very important neurological developmental pieces involved simultaneously, and every child is a unique combination of sensory dysfunction, sensory debilitative addictive behaviors, degrees of development of auditory and visual sequential processing, somewhere in terms of an imbalance between visualization and conceptualization. So we need to look at every child as a very, very, very unique individual and determine how to best implement a program that is specific for them. Now, one of the things that has made things difficult for many, many families around the world with children on the spectrum is kind of the search, if you will, for a magic pill. And the magic pill can be represented by a medication, a drug, a supplement, a combination of supplements. It can be represented as a specific methodology. Unfortunately, there's not a magic pill. There's not going to be a magic pill. At NACD, we utilize literally over 3,000 different specific techniques and methodologies. 3,000. And our job with every child that we see is to look at that child as a unique individual he or she is, with a unique set of issues, at a unique place in terms of balance, imbalance between all these major neurological, developmental, sensory issues, and understanding where that child is, and then taking from all these different techniques and methodologies that we have in an attempt to determine what is going to have the best impact at that time to significantly change and develop this child. Unfortunately out there, the perception is that the majority of children on the spectrum are kind of doomed to be there. Fortunately, for a lot of years, we've been seeing a lot of children who were able to move off the spectrum to assist them in their development and, to lead successful functional lives. But it's not an easy thing. When I say to a family that it's often necessary to keep your child engaged virtually the entire waking day, that is a daunting task. And essentially we go through a process, where we're designing programs for the children, but we're educating the parents, we're educating the family to help understand their child, their unique child, in terms of how they need to be addressed and how they need to be worked with. And as we progress with them, the picture keeps changing. At one point, we have more auditory issues than visual issues, then we have more visual issues than auditory issues, and then it's more of a processing problem, and then it's a visualization, conceptualization imbalance. So lots of different issues, and then on top of all that, we have education. And part of what makes education difficult is typical education is simply a reflection of what's been done forever. Typical education is not efficient. Typical education is not neurodevelopmentally based. Just things are done because that's how they've been done. All right, if we are going to successfully educate our children who have issues, We can do it, again, if we understand that unique child, where that child is, where their strengths are, where their inefficiencies are. How do we teach to educate to their strengths while we're remediating their inefficiencies? And how do we do it being very specific and doing it with as much positive intensity as we possibly can, and actually in as short a duration during the day as we possibly can. Speaking of duration, one of the issues with a lot of the kids is what was done, what was first initiated back in the early 70s with the kids on the spectrum was a sensory behavior modification. Because there really wasn't an understanding with most of the people in the field in terms of what was actually going on. Actually, today there still isn't much of an understanding with most of the professionals in terms of what's going on. But back then, they really didn't have much of a clue. So the perception was the job is to take that individual as they are, attempt to teach them as many things as we can. So essentially it was skill-based, behaviorally based, as opposed to neurodevelopmentally based. One of the tougher things sometimes for us is children who have engaged in long-term skill-based work, which is largely trying to pull things out, output-based, at which point the kids often are resistant to a lot of interaction. It's very important, if we are in fact going to maximize the function and ability and potential of the kids, to look at them neurodevelopmentally and say, what are the pieces that need to be fixed, what are the pieces that need to be developed, and how do we do that? How do we in fact change that brain? Now, relative to changing the brain, in the last few years there has been, to someone like myself, this has been kind of shocking, but you hear these literally headlines about people discovering neuroplasticity. But we knew about neuroplasticity, in the 50s and 60s. And neurodevelopmentally, that's what the whole deal is about. The brain responds to stimulation, right? And how the brain is used determines how the brain develops. All right, if we modify input, we are changing how the brain processes information. We're actually changing the physical makeup and structure and networking of the brain. Bottom line, the process neurodevelopmentally of normalizing sensory function, developing sequential processing, educating the child, is a process of changing their brain. It's a process of providing the specific appropriate stimulation with the sufficient frequency, intensity, and duration so as to actually produce specific change in the brain. Right? So it's a brain-based thing. Do physiological issues have impact? Absolutely. One of the things we see with our children, our full case little children we work with, is that the more neurologically involved kids are, the more physiologically sensitive our children are. Now, if we look at our gifted, accelerated children we have on our program, those kids can eat garbage all day long, full of sugars and colorings, and they can sleep 3 hours a night, be exposed to people with the flu, and they're terrific. They function well. The more involved our kids are, the more physiologically sensitive they are. And if you think about it, the brain in fact controls the whole show. So the more neurologically involved a child is, the more physiologically involved they are. Now, part of what makes this tricky is that in terms of kids with sensory dysfunction and physiological disorder, essentially their systems can be characterized as extremely sensitive. Extremely, extremely sensitive, which means they are sensitive not only to disease issues, if you will, of everything from you know, candida to the flu, to allergies, all right, but they're also extremely sensitive to medications and drugs and supplements. And one of the things that has been difficult with this population through the last 10 years has been more and more intervention that tends to be shotgun approaches with doing heavy supplementation, heavy chelation, and things that actually tend to tear apart and disrupt the system. So working physiologically with the kids, it's a very delicate, sensitive thing that has to be addressed, where you kind of do one thing at a time, look for the effects of that, and approach it scientifically and carefully. Right? By the way, you know, I mentioned chelation. About the only way we have found that appears to be really safe for the vast majority of our kids to eliminate toxins, heavy metals, and such is saunas. We have watched, you know, kids, you know, many years working with different practitioners, and we'll work with a child and we'll see good development, and then they'll chelate the child, and the child crashes and burns because they've released the toxins back into the bloodstream. We'll take a few months, we'll build them back up again, and they blast them again, and we have everything back in the bloodstream, and we go back and forth, and it's not until we get them to slow down all those processes and go very slowly, very carefully, that we're able to really get the child moving along the way we want to see them move along. Right. So is there a relationship between the child's neurological function and physiological? Yes. Do I ever expect to see a physiological approach that solves the problem for us? No, I don't. And relative to that, something that's important to understand. You know, we tend to perceive children who are quote-unquote autistic or on the autism spectrum as having a specific disease that is relatively unique. It's not unique. Every child with a neurodevelopmental problem has degrees of all of these issues. Slow down the developmental process for any child, and you have problems with sensory dysfunction. You have problems with them developing debilitating sensory addictive behaviors. You have problems relative to they become too strong on visualization, and we have a visualization conceptualization imbalance. We have a sequential processing delay and lack. You know, I've been in this field for long enough that I was back there when we had large institutions where virtually every child who was brain injured, Down syndrome, had any developmental issue was institutionalized. I can tell you that going into an institution back then, every child in that institution, by today's standard, would be classified as autistic, and severely autistic to a degree that is rarely seen today. So it is a developmental disorder. There's a variety, I'm sure there's a variety of causes and triggers and things that produce it, but we need to stop perceiving it as being a unique disease. Because as long as we perceive it as being a unique disease, we're not perceiving the children as being unique individuals with their own set of issues, their own sets of problems, all right, that need to be addressed. All right, it is a neurological issue. It's a neurodevelopmental problem. And the better job we can do of understanding those neurodevelopmental pieces and how to address those with the individual child, the faster we're going to get all the kids to where we need them to be. And again, our goal, our expectation is for the majority of the kids that we see on the spectrum to get them into a normal range of function, and many of them on the high end of that range of function. At this point, why don't I open this up so you can ask me some questions, and Now I'll see if I can give you specific information that you're looking for.
If anybody has any questions, please raise their hands. I'm going to unmute them. Also, it gives a lot of echo and you won't be able to hear Bob. If you don't have mic, please type in the question. I will read it, and Bob will be able to answer them. Neelam wants to know how many hours can we devote to this program? Is this an after-school program or homeschool program?
It's all relative to the child, the school, and the circumstances. Around the United States, we're often successful at getting schools to implement the program. We have an implementation center in New Delhi where children get their programs accomplished. But it's all relative. The higher the level of the function, the more flexibility we have. If we have children who tend to engage, for example, in debilitating sensory addictive behaviors a good part of the day, and if they're sent to school and the school permits that, we're not going to go anywhere fast. So it all really is very dependent upon the specific child, if they're attending school, to what degree the school is going to assist with the program, and what the resources are of the parents.
We have two panelists join here, Vidya and Prachi. I'm going to unmute one person at one time, and we appreciate if Vidya or Prachi can talk something about what the work they've done in India. And then I'm going to move to one more question. Prachi, if you have mic, and if you could give some information about your work in Delhi, that would be great.
Yes, we have implementation center running in Gurgaon at the moment, and we have few of our kids coming over for implementation, and the kids that we have, the eldest kid that we have with autism on our program is 18, and the youngest is around 6. And we have kids in Bombay, Bangalore, Delhi, and Gurgaon. And so that's about Delhi. And any other questions?
Prachi, there's I have a question from my side. That do you have a copy of the CDs, Miracles of Child Development audio series in India?
Yes, I do. You can give me a call and I'll be able to mail them to you, or you can get them picked up from the center.
Okay.
I have a few copies with me. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to send you an email and ask the parents who are interested, they can contact you or just get in touch with you.
G.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The question is to Bob. Bob said there are 3 parts. One is the sensory dysfunction, another is sequential processing, and what's the third one?
If I've understood the question correctly, the third big piece is the imbalance between visualization and conceptualization, meaning that our children excuse me, on the spectrum tend to think primarily in pictures rather than words. And to get them to communicate well and to get them to be able to understand concepts we have to change that balance and make them a little more of a conceptualizer that is thinking in words than a visualizer.
Question is, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
It might be helpful, Prachi, to maybe tell the folks about what, some of the kids you're presently working with are doing.
Specific to kids with autism, we have got a lot of them are doing that. Most of our kids who are coming to the center are homeschooled. So they're doing academics, they're doing their sensory integration, therapeutic listening program, and basically most of the program is done at the center with them. We're able to cover almost the whole program in the session that we have with them. So we are working on communication, we are working on sensory demands of every child, and we are working on academics. And kids are doing well. One of our kids moved up 1.5 grade level in math within the 3 months of working with him. And so that's it.
Prachi, my question to you is, when you say the therapeutic listening, what kind of listening programs do you incorporate?
We have we do the TLP, the therapeutic listening program that was that was created by Mr. Doman, and that's a 15-minute program, and it basically has 10 CDs, and a 15-minute protocol every day is enough, is the protocol for the day, and so that's the sound therapy that we use.
My next question is to Bob. There's a parent asking, for assessment purpose, what areas of visual processing do we need to look into for a 5-year-old boy with autism?
What level, if I understood again the question, what level of visual processing should a 5-year-old have? Again, our bigger concern is the auditory with the kids on the spectrum than the visual. A child who's 5 years old should have visual sequential processing, about 5 pieces, same relative to the auditory. And if I may, let me address a little bit, in terms of that last question that Prachi addressed, in terms of auditory training programs. We're investigating a number of different things at this point. One of the problems in addressing the auditory issues is at this point there is no really good tool to assess auditory tonal processing. Audiograms, for example, will typically test 6 or 8 frequencies out of 20,000. And because the auditory issues are very frequency specific, that's a long ways from identifying what's going on with the individual children. We're now in the process of starting to use voice analysis. Essentially your voice represents the frequencies of sound you process. And by looking at voice analysis, we're getting a better understanding in terms of where a specific child is, and we're now in the process of creating individualized auditory training programs that are really very specific to the child.
Voice analysis. do you mean just like, can you just throw some more light on it? Because when I had done the Tomatoes listening program for my son, they usually record mother's voice, and then the child listens to that voice at a certain frequency. Is it something like that, or it's different?
With Tomatoes, they use feedback of your own voice to help to some degree to help you modify it. This is different. We essentially take digital recordings of the child's voice, and we do a spectral analysis of it in terms of looking at the specific frequencies that are present and specific frequencies that are overstated or understated, so that we can customize an auditory training program for them.
Question is from Delhi. The parents say that last year on your advice, we are still watching Anmol 24/7, so he doesn't stim, and engage him as much as possible. But still he loves to stim the moment he is free, even for some minutes. We're constantly watching him, but his stims are still very strong. What else can you suggest to lower the tendency to stim, which is very strong?
Well, essentially, it's a matter of neurodevelopmentally. As I said, we not only have to stop the debilitating sensory addictive behaviors and normalize the sensory channels, we also have to move the sequential processing along. So essentially, we need the tools for greater complexity of thought, so that the child can engage in appropriate play and appropriate activities. And then part of it is, as well, is teaching the child, in fact, how to engage appropriately, which is not necessarily an easy deal. We're getting a lot of mileage out of computer touchscreens, which are a step beyond simple cause and effect toys. That the children can engage in when their sequential processing is still relatively low. But again, it's a matter of normalizing the sensory channels, stopping the debilitating sensory addictive behaviors, develop the sequential processing, which is complexity of thought, and then giving the child normal, appropriate things to engage in to move them along. The addictive behaviors are addictive behaviors, and it can take a long time before they are totally gone. It's a matter of steps and pieces of putting the whole picture together. And sometimes those addictive behaviors change a bit in terms of the child, for example, may be engaging more in visualization, perseveration, than active sensory stimming, and in which case with those kids it's getting the auditory and conceptual piece up stronger. But every child is, as I say, is their unique set of pieces, and you can't cheat the system. We've got to address all of those issues and put all those pieces together.
Vidya, and I'm going to unmute Vidya. I'm not sure if she's also using the mic, because I'm seeing the phone. Is she on the phone? We all are on the voice over IP, so I don't know. Yes, she's on the phone. Yeah, we are on the voice over IP. Is it possible that you can use mic and speakers, so we'll be able to hear you? In the meantime, I had a question to Bob. Bob, as you say that parents do play a phenomenal role, but it's extremely difficult when a child is very, very hyper, and as one of the mothers from Delhi said, that the stims are extremely high, and keeping the child 24/7 busy it's extremely difficult, and then it's very exhausting to the parents. Do you have some suggestions, like it's on similar grounds, that what can be done? If I leave my son, he'll be constantly playing with the papers or plastics. Definitely he had lots of behaviors, and they have tremendously come down. And every piece of a puzzle, like even biomedical intervention and everything, I think does play a role. It has played a role in my child's life. I do see a lot of the behaviors come down. A diet makes a difference. Chelation has made him a difference. At present, I'm definitely struggling with his processing, his word retention, and his auditory issues.
Yeah, again, yes, there's a lot of pieces. One of the things, what we're jealous of is all the families living in India, where you have a source of a lot of cheap manpower. Our ability, for example, to implement program within our center is something we can't do here in the States. A lot of our families are trying to utilize volunteer help. I educate parents in terms of, the best people you can find to work with most of our children on the spectrum are young girls, 11, 12, 13-year-old girls. But the reality is, the more we can keep them engaged, the better. Is it an easy deal? It absolutely isn't. But as with any addiction, the closer we can come to not permitting it to happen, the faster we get rid of the addiction and move along. And it's a difficult reality, but it is one of the realities.
I'm going to take the questions. I have one more question here for Bob. In your practice, do you recommend using prism glasses to help address visual issues?
No, I've not found prism glasses to have a long-term effect on the macular vision. I just had two parents in last week who are both optometrists, and we discussed that specifically, and their analysis was the same as mine, which essentially is that for a short term, simply because the prism glasses change how things look, that for a short term the child visually attends better, but the child generally will adjust to that, within weeks or months, and it will no longer have the effect. I don't see it doing anything specific neurologically to address that macular peripheral issue. It really is just a matter of changing the visual look of things so the child temporarily has to attend better.
I'm Vidya, and I'm going to unmute Vidya. Vidya is again in Delhi, and would appreciate if you could tell me some of the work which you are doing, or if you want to add anything and more comments.
Hi, can you hear me? I actually do not live in Delhi. I live in the United States. Hello? Hi, this is Vidya. I do not live in Delhi. I live in the United States, but I used to travel to Delhi as the evaluator there, so we had Prachi on board. I just actually wanted to add a few comments to the earlier question about the stimming and the parents, the challenges the parent faces, because I'm both staff and I've also have a child of my own who's 10 now, who started on program at 3, and who was a very, very sensory child. Pretty much when we first started working with Bob, all she did was stim, around the clock. And everything that Bob said, we've kind of worked through personally with her and seen the changes. And the progression of the stimming, it is very challenging. I mean, initially I'd say it took me, I had to keep her engaged around the clock. I used a lot of help, with family, mostly with family members. So definitely use all the support you can get. Don't expect to do it by yourself. But the progression of the stimming really went from all she wanted to do was stim, no matter what you were trying to do with her, to as the sequential processing improves, you get a child who starts to get interested in learning. And then that will replace some of the stimming. So as long as you're engaging the child, they're not stimming. So they only stim when they're free, when they're downtime, when they're bored. And then it gets to a point where the child's global processing and function improves to a point where they are able to learn from the environment, learn on their own. We get the reading level up as quickly as we can with our children so that they can read in place of stimming. When you hit that point, the child is more likely to engage themselves, at least with some direction from you, if not, without needing kind of the one-on-one, stay on top of me kind of involvement. With just a little bit of structure and routine, making everything available to them and directing them a little bit, they're able to engage themselves independently. And then you get to a point where, like now, my 10-year-old will only pretend to stim when she wants my attention, but otherwise is really capable of saying, I'm bored, I want something to do, I'm going to go do this, and being more interactive with other kids and, engaging herself appropriately and preferring that to the stimming. So it's taken me 7 to 8 years to get here, but that is the typical, that seems to be kind of the typical progression our kids go through, provided in addition to keeping them engaged, we are actually improving the global processing, the auditory sequential processing, the balance between the visualization and conceptualization. If we don't do that, then they're just going to keep going back to the stimming because there's nothing to replace it with. We really need to improve their processing to a point where they can think, they can learn, and interact appropriately. Then the drive to stim is not such a big deal. I don't think now her drive to stim is any more than, mine. She wants downtime like I want downtime. She takes a break like I take a break, but it's not the primary need anymore. So it is very challenging, but it was totally worth it. It's totally worth it because until we kept her engaged and worked on it, on putting all the other pieces together, there was no progress in terms of development, in terms of getting out of that place. So that's kind of my experience as a parent, and we're seeing that with with a lot of our kids in India. We've seen kind of the similar progression. At least they're on their way there. As we start getting their language and conceptual thought and processing up, the need to stim goes down. So I just wanted to add that to the previous question.
Thank you, and Vidya, I'm sorry, I thought you were in Delhi, so I apologize for that. My question was, you incorporate a lot of the listening program, the fast forward, the TDI, and a lot of can you give some information about a little bit of each if possible, so we know what things you incorporate. Anybody wants to answer? I don't know if Bob wants to answer, or Vidya or Prachi. I'm going to keep it open. Maybe Bob.
Well, targeted developmental intervention essentially is saying that we use many specific child-specific methodologies. You mentioned fast forward. One of my staff was one of the first group of people trained in fast forward, and I didn't want to guess how many years ago that was, 15 years or more, I would guess. And typically with a caseload of close to 1,000 children that we're working with, I have used Fast Forward with about 15 kids in all that time. And this is a good example. You know, Fast Forward was developed through research specifically to address issues with the rapidity with which children can process specific tones of frequencies. Not the tonal processing itself, not sequential processing, but there's a very few children who can process a frequency of sound, a tone, and then there's a lag before they can process the next one. And that creates a specific problem relative to processing language. But it's really a very rare problem. The tonal processing is common, sequential processing is common, but this issue with the rate at which they process is not common. So with all those children in all those years, I've only used that tool 15 times. All right? And this really exemplifies the problem and the solution out there. All right? Because there are so many people that find a tool and they say, okay, this is it. This is what we're going to apply. And a lot of people, all their practice is using Fast Forward or using a few tools in their toolbox to address a broad range of issues. It's a good tool, and it's an appropriate tool for a few kids, but it's certainly not a tool for the majority of kids, right? So the challenge becomes with every child is determining that child's specific needs. All right, so targeted developmental intervention means exactly that. We have to target the specific needs of that child and pull out the tools from the toolbox specifically they're going to help that child. You know, every day I fight the battle, gee, do you believe in this technique, do you believe in that technique or that technique? Well, yeah, most of them, in fact, but targeted for the specific individual. It's not one size fits all. It's not that even though our children may have many similarities, they are all significantly unique. And to be successful, we have to target what we're doing for that specific child. Yeah, so that's really the key. It's not about talking about specific methodologies. It's talking about really, really understanding the problem, really understanding the individual, and picking the tools to fit that individual.
I'm going to unmute the...
Hi, this is Vidya. Just want to add a quick thing. You know, other than the listening program, with our kids in India, with most of our, you know, even in my own experience, most of our activities are very low-tech and inexpensive to do. You know, it's not like we use a lot of gadgets and softwares and things that make it very expensive and inaccessible to families. Okay, I just wanted to kind of add that for most of the kids, it's how we do it, it's what we do. We train the parents, give them very specific techniques and skills that they can use with their children. It's not the gadget that's important.
What is a tool you have, or you have any tools for writing? And I'm also my next question also will be on anything for retention. My son definitely, when it comes to expressive alphabets, he has a big problem of word retention. So,
well, all right, just two questions. Writing. All right, writing is a neurodevelopmental function. All right, it requires, first of all, macular function. You've got to be able to look at what you're doing to do it well. All right, so if we have a child who's too peripheral, they can't visually attend to the task well enough to do the task. There are issues of muscle tone. There's issues of muscle balance. All right, there's issues of global, where the child is in terms of their global neurodevelopmental function. For example, a typical 3-year-old might have the motor control to write, but their global neurodevelopmental function of a 3-year-old will not permit the attention to permit them to write. All right, you could, 3 lines thrown together to a 3-year-old is an A no matter what how any of those 3 lines fit together. All right, so they're not going to be motivated to produce, a well-formed letter A for the most part. All right, they just don't care. So, what is a technique for teaching writing? It's putting together all the neurodevelopmental pieces, all the motor pieces to make it happen. The specific tools in terms of, what writing books or whatever we use, it really doesn't matter. I mean, we use everything from handwriting without tears to italics, depending on the individual and what the circumstances are. But again, it's a matter of putting all the neurodevelopmental pieces together to permit the function. In terms of general neurological organization, part of what happens as we put the neurological pieces together, we establish a dominant controlling hemisphere of the brain. The dominant controlling hemisphere of the brain is significant relative to logical, analytical thought, and specific long-term memory and language function. So again, that is also a neural developmental piece, and it's a matter of combining a lot of things to make that happen, to produce that specific long-term memory and retention.
Question from the parent, a general query: what is more important, academics or independence in day-to-day living? This is one of the father from Delhi, Dheeraj, asking.
Well, I mean, in terms Hello? Okay, in terms of what's most important, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good if you've got academic function if you can't function in society. There shouldn't be a choice of one or the other. As we're working with a child, it's it's necessary that we put all those pieces together. And again, if you're looking at a skill-based program, you're making a choice between, do we teach this skill or do we teach that skill? But if we're doing it neurodevelopmentally, the specific skills tend to happen and develop as they do with any other child as we put the neurodevelopmental pieces together. So you shouldn't be in a position of choosing, do we teach that or do we teach that? It should be a matter, if we're putting the pieces together, we're permitting the child to engage and function and learn as does any other child.
My question is there anything Bob can recommend for faster processing speed to add? Is processing speed a function of sequential processing?
Processing speed is largely a reflection of sequential processing, and also, again, the balance between the visualization and conceptualization. For example, if you're having a child who's a visualizer trying to process a sequence of auditory directions, if the child cannot conceptualize, it means he has to take those auditory pieces, visualize them, and then transfer that to action. All right, so that's a much longer, slower loop than just taking the auditory information in, dealing with it conceptually, and acting. So processing speed is related to sequential processing, but also visualization and conceptualization, as well as, again, general neurological efficiency.
This program help with developing their social skills or even interest in people outside their family? My son is 6, can read, can follow 3 directions, can build really complex Lego structure, has good language. Okay,
well, if he's following 3 directions, you're saying that neurodevelopmentally, processing, he's a 3. So I wouldn't expect social interaction for that child to be significantly better than it is for most children who are chronologically 3 years old, which means not much social interaction. So, you know, once again, it's a matter of you've got to put all the pieces together to produce the change. If you're concentrating on skills and teaching specific skills, you have these high splinter skills, but you haven't necessarily produced the global change that you want.
Any more questions? Please either do raise the hand. I can unmute you if you have mic. If not, type in the question, and I can ask Bob, and he can answer it. Bob, if you could just give a little bit information if one has to start on the NACD program in India or in US, what is the way to go?
The process is essentially we require all families to listen to our child development CDs. That's necessary because we want everyone to completely understand what our approach is and what we're doing. For families on the spectrum, I'd also encourage them to watch our DVD on autism. We want to have informed parents in our program. Having done that, the family needs to submit an application. We will have one of our staff interview the family, again, to make sure they thoroughly understand what it is we do, how we do it, and what commitment is involved from them. And then if all that is satisfactory, then we schedule an appointment and get the family going.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. Okay, what is the difference between what is the difference with NS? Sorry, without NS. Difference without NACD or with RDI?
Well, you know, that I don't know that I'm the one to answer that question. I think everyone needs to evaluate what's out there and determine what, they think is appropriate for them. I don't think there's a comparison to be made.
Okay. Any more questions? Please do. We will be there maybe just for 2 or 3 minutes. I don't see much of questions coming. I want to thank you, Bob, for giving your time. Thank you so much. I want to thank you everybody for attending this webinar, and I want to thank you Vidya and Prachi for all your time. And the CDs, the child development CDs, are really excellent source, and it really gives a lot of hope, and I'm very excited. I'm almost writing my son's application. So again, I want to thank you, Bob, very much, and thank you.
You're most welcome. Yeah, you're welcome, and those families are still on. Folks, believe in the potential of your children. Lack of development is not an indication of lack of potential for development. Look at what you're doing. If you're being successful with what you're doing, wonderful, pursue it. If you're not pleased with what you're doing, you need to continue to look and continue to modify until you find the solution for your child.
Thank you everybody, and if anybody has any questions, they can email me. I can email it to Bob and Vidya and Prachi, and they can add the comments. And thank you again, and hopefully to you all to see you for our next webinar, and we'll announce our next webinar soon. Thank you very much, everybody.